This is Joe Biden, the President of the United States. On January 6, 2022, during a ceremony at the White House, Biden went off script.
If I can halt for a second and just say to you, the impact what happened on July the 6th had international repercussions beyond what I think any of you can fully understand.
Oh right, July 6th. That's the anniversary of the bombing of the Georgia Guidestones. Rest in peace, American Stonehenge. But of course, he meant to say January 6th. But watch this guy's reaction when Biden screwed it up.
The impact what happened on July the 6th had international repercussions beyond what I think any of you can fully understand.
Classic. From there, Biden went on to tell a tale about how world leaders saw the United States after witnessing the events of July 6th. I mean January 6th.
The first meeting I had of what they call the G7, the 7 leading economies in the world, democracies, I sat down. It was in February. It was in England.
No, stupid. It was in June, not February. But whatever, who cares about details?
And I sat next to the President of France, across from the Chancellor from Germany, etc. And I said, America's back. You know what the response was? Not a joke. For how long? For how long?
And if you know anything about Joe Biden, when he says not a joke, it means he's lying.
And I just sat there and looked, and I believe it was the Prime Minister of Italy who said, but I can't remember for certain which of the 6 said it. And what would you think, Mr. President, if tomorrow you woke up and you had a headline in the press saying that in the British Parliament, a mob had come down the hall, broken down the doors of the House of Commons. Police officers were killed or died. The place was vandalized in order to overthrow the election of a Speaker of the House, a Prime Minister's election.
Okay, so during one of the most important meetings of his career, one of the 6 most powerful leaders in the world supposedly rattled off this long anecdote about January 6th, and Joe Biden can't remember who said it.
Think about it. Think about it.
Furthermore, Biden is comparing a federal election where millions of Americans vote for president with the election of the British Prime Minister, an election that doesn't exist. For clarity, voters do not choose the Prime Minister. The political party that wins the most seats in the House of Commons at a general election usually forms the new government. Its leader is then appointed Prime Minister by the monarch, i.e. the king. But again, who cares about small details? Anyway, as the top senior political analyst on YouTube, an unfortunate part of my job is that I have to watch every single Joe Biden speech, ceremony, event, etc. And with that said, I can tell you that Biden has told this story in public at least 30 times. And I thought it would be interesting to show how it's changed over the course of Joe Biden's residency. So Biden's story is in 2 parts. The response he received when he said, America is back, and the anecdote about January 6th and British Parliament, which we will explore first.
And then I think it was Schultz, I'm not positive who the second one says, imagine Joe, if in fact you went to bed tonight here in England, woke up in the morning and found out that the British Parliament was attacked, they killed 2 cops, broke down the doors of the Parliament, went into the House Representatives to stop the House and to stop an election outcome. What would you think? What would you think?
Well, Joe, first, I think you just called the House of Commons the House of Representatives.
Went into the House Representatives to stop the House.
Second, you said that German Chancellor Olaf Scholz was at your first G7 meeting. However, he wasn't Chancellor of Germany yet. That would be Angela Merkel. And it seems that Biden is confusing the 2 of them, because in the next clip, he refers to Scholz as a she.
And then I think it was I think it was Schultz of Germany, but I can't remember for certain. But one of them said to me, she said, Mr. President.
Blah, 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 blah.
I'm being deadly earnest now. I give my word this is what the discussion was.
Joe Biden's word is about as good as used toilet paper. So first he thought it was the Italian prime minister, then the German chancellor, who wasn't chancellor yet. Other times, he's claimed that it was French President Emmanuel Macron who said it. Now, there's no video or audio for the following examples, but we do have the official White House transcripts. And Macron looked to me and he said, "What would you say, Mr. President?" But at other times, he can't say for sure if it was actually Macron. And I think it was Macron who said to me from France. And at a reception on November 1st, Biden was really fuzzy on the details. And then, I think it was Macron who said to me, although it could have been Schultz said to me. And it happened again 3 days later. Here's what they said. It was either Schultz or, I can't remember, Boris that said it to me. Now, even though Biden had claimed on numerous occasions that it was either Macron or Scholz or Johnson that said it, there were random speeches in between where he wanted to keep it a mystery.
And I looked at them, and then another one went on to say, and I'm not going to name them, went on to say, "What would you say, Joe?"
And then one said, and I won't say who it was, but one of those heads of state looked at me and said, "What would you say, Mr. President?" And then one of them pointed out, without naming him, pointed out to me, "What would you say, Mr. President?" Why wouldn't he name names when he did in the past? Well, if I only had one guess, it would be that in those individual moments, he forgot all of the G7 leaders' names and which countries they're from. Hell, he can't even remember that Kamala Harris is the vice president.
I'm not being facetious. Well, President Harris led this effort.
President Harris.
I'll tell you one quick story. I showed up in February after I got elected in January. Got sworn in to the so-called G7. That's the 7 largest democratic economies in London.
No, it took place in Cornwall, which is roughly 250 miles away from London, and it was in June, not February. Again, details.
And I said, "America's back." And one of the leaders looked at me and said, "For how long?" Oh, I'm serious. Think about it now.
And now we're at the America is back, but for how long part of this BS. And what's revealing is how this alleged incident has evolved. In the early days of this tale, Biden was connecting it with things like American manufacturing or the economy. Here he is during a virtual meeting with governors talking about infrastructure investment.
You know what affects the attitude of the rest of the world about the United States? Can we still get things done? Not a joke. Not a joke. When I went over, I said, with those 7 leaders, I said, "We're back." And the response was, "For how long? For how long? You guys can't get anything done."
So obviously that had nothing to do with democracy. It was about infrastructure and getting Congress to approve funding. That's it. Another example of this is when Biden gave remarks at a Mack truck assembly plant.
And that's why I've told every foreign leader, and I just got back from Europe meeting with heads of state. One said to me, I said, "America's back." And he said, "For how long?" The head of state. And I said, "You know, I want to tell you something. It's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America. We never fail when we decide we're going to do something. So today, I'm placing my bet on America. I know you all are going to make sure it pays off, because it will pay off with good jobs, long-term employment, the ability for America to once again reassert its role as the most powerful economy in the world."
Again, you can clearly see that this has nothing to do with January 6th or the so-called insurrection. But within a few months, Biden would take it and twist it like a pretzel. On January 11th, 2022, during his now infamous Jim Crow 2.0 speech, Biden claimed the following.
When I showed up at the G7 with 7 other world leaders, there were a total of 9 present. I said, "America's back."
And the response was, for how long? For how long? As someone who's worked in foreign policy my whole life, I never thought I would ever hear our allies say something like that.
And like magic, the details of that alleged conversation went from Biden defending American greatness to, oh my God, world leaders are worried that American democracy is on the verge of collapse.
And I sat down at a table, a round table, with the 6 other world leaders from the European Union and Canada, et cetera, and said, America's back. And one of them turned to me and said, for how long? For how long? It was a deadly earnest question. For how long?
So Biden was spewing all of this bullshit leading up to the 2022 midterms in an attempt to scare voters.
And I sat down and I said, America's back. And one of the presidents... Well, by the way, one of the presidents said to me, I think it was Macron, looked at me and said, for how long?
Wow, what an inspiring speech. If you don't vote Democrat, democracy will die. And the first thing I said when I walked in, I said, America is back. And I will not, with the press here, say, when 2 heads of state said the same thing. For how long? For how long? So first Biden claimed that Macron said for how long, but there he said that it was 2 heads of state that said it.
I sat down for this 3-day conference and I said, America's back. And Macron, president of France, turned to me and said, for how long? For how long? They made a discussion with Schmidt and all that. I mean, just for how long?
Biden claims he had a discussion with Schmidt. Who is Schmidt, you ask? Well, that would be Helmut Schmidt, the former chancellor of West Germany, who left office in 1982. Now, maybe you're thinking, oh, well, maybe the former chancellor attended the G7, like in an advisory position. Or maybe he just dropped by to say hi. Except I should mention that Helmut Schmidt died in 2015. And if you think that's bad... And I sat down and I said, America's back. And Mitterrand looked at me and he said, it is? No, I'm serious. And he said, for how long? Mitterrand. Joe Biden claims that he had a conversation with Francois Mitterrand, who hasn't been president of France since 1995, not to mention that Mitterrand died in 1996. But you know what? I wasn't there. Maybe Biden spoke to Schmidt and Mitterrand's force ghosts, I don't know. And to show how full of it Biden is, here's the very first time he told the America is back but for how long story.
In my conversations with world leaders, and I've spoken to over 38, 40 of them now, I've made it known that America's back. And you know what they say? The comment I hear most of all from them? So they say, we see America's back, but for how long? But for how long?
I guarantee that if you looked at the transcripts of every single phone call or meeting that Biden had with these world leaders, you wouldn't find a single instance where any of them responded negatively to Biden's America is back proclamation. If anything, I'm sure that they were complimentary and said stuff like, that is both wonderful and reassuring to hear, Monsieur President, and thank you for wearing a mask. I wouldn't want to accidentally catch COVID while speaking on the phone. But Biden can't put that in a speech. Instead, he's trying to paint America as the underdog and that he's some kind of hero and he's the only one that can save America.
No matter where I go in the world, whether it was the Inter-American Conference we just had for this hemisphere, or NATO, or dealing with the ASEAN countries or the Far East, guess what? They look at me and I say America's back, and they look at me and they say, for how long?
So let me get this straight. Whenever Joe Biden meets world leaders, he tells them America is back, and they all question him and say, for how long? Really? And if you think that's a bunch of BS, check out this final clip.
And I said, America's back. And the president of one of the major companies looked at me and said, for how long? For how long? Well, guess what?
What, Joe?
Two of them said to me that they thought that America's days were over as leader.
Oh, really? You're telling me that one of these world leaders told Joe Biden that America's days as leader were over? They wouldn't have the guts. And even if they did say it, which they didn't, who cares? Even with Joke Biden at the helm, America is still better than the rest of the G7 nations combined. So they can get bent. And with that said, that's it for now. Follow me on Twitter at Don'tWalkRun. A special thanks to Poofy for her help with the script, and be sure that you're still subscribed to the channel. As always, I hope to see you next time. If there is next time.